utilities and other types of assessment opportunities or requirements. Basically, in the mid-'70s, I went to work for the county in '79. When I came to work for the county in '79, the county had already established for the local residential streets what they called the Charlotte Street Unit, MSTU, that levied a 2 mil tax on all properties for the local road system across the board. 2 mils generated probably on an average, well, it depended on where you were. Okay, this is the problem. Across the county, there were areas that had reasonably good tax base, where 2 mils would provide enough revenue for the type of maintenance program you needed for roads and drainage. You got outside of those areas that were densely populated. We had predominantly vacant lots. Just think about this. Valued at about $1,500 a piece at that time. At 2 mils, they were producing $3 a lot, a vacant lot. Rule of thumb is in the general development type subdivision, you have about 100, rule of thumb, 100 lots per mile, generating $300 a mile. The need in 1980 was $5,000 a mile. That's easy arithmetic. That's not calculus. You did not generate enough money in those from those vacant lots to have a decent road program. So what you had were the affluent areas, the Keys, Bear Island, down around the beach complex, and other places that had a good tax base, completely subsidizing everybody else. It was unfair. And as a consequence, nobody was getting a reasonable road program. That's the reality of it. Ad valorem wasn't working. There's not enough value per mile. That's the key. You have to have a certain threshold of value per mile for it to work. If you don't, it won't. So what we did in 1980, as a result of the 1981 road agreement with General Development Corporation, Kevin, you might have been here at that time, they were getting ready, they wanted to turn over miles and miles and miles of roadways. And Port Charlotte was broken up into over 100 sections, subdivision sections. And they were under construction in Englewood East, South Gulf Cove, all over the place. But we wanted a program of transfer of those roads to the county for maintenance, because people were calling up wondering who maintains our roads. And we said, well, you can't, the county's not going out to maintain, you got to call General Development. The taxpayers were out there in total confusion. So we decided in '81 to work out an agreement with General Development for a road acceptance program. So we had to have a mechanism, a methodology to maintain these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles that had no tax base. That's really what was the catalyst to the original MSBU. But we set up and drew a boundary around the areas in Port Charlotte and West County and South County that did have enough value per mile to exist on 2 mils. And we called it the Port Charlotte Urban, the West Charlotte Urban Taxing Unit, MSTU, and the South Punta Gorda Urban at 2 mils. And they worked. Somewhere, about 10 years, I left in '84, about 10 years or so after I left, the county completely converted everything to MSBUs. You weren't here, she wasn't here. I don't know why they did it. It was the county commission at that time and the people in administration at that time.
How many BUs are there versus TUs now?
Gordon? Let me, before you go there. When I left in '84, we had 3 MSTUs, Port Charlotte Urban, West Charlotte Urban, Port Punta Gorda Urban, and about a half a dozen MSBUs. Just created Deep Creek, because it was just, L. Johns was just, Punta Gorda was just coming out of the ground with Deep Creek. And so we had fewer than a dozen. Today?
Don't quote me exactly, somewhere around 80 MSBUs and about 6 MSTUs.
What are the taxing units versus non-ad valorem?
If I could add, though, to what Commissioner Dory said, because it was a situation then, and it's still very much the situation now. If you look at just the numbers, just the plain numbers, somewhere around 220,000 platted lots, 2,200 miles of roadway, 170 miles of canals, okay, in order to maintain those. If you just look at the numbers, and I ran a few, I mean, we estimate somewhere between 60 and 70% of the county is still vacant. So you would have 30 to 40% of the county, those of us who live here, homesteaded here, that would be paying the bill for all 2,000 miles of roadway, all, you know. If you run just some numbers, and I just ran a couple of examples, if you take an extreme example, which would be Northwest Port Charlotte, where you've got, 15,000 vacant. In Northwest Port Charlotte, they're currently paying, for the street drainage, they're currently paying $218 per ERU, okay, regardless of what's there. If we converted that to an MSTU, raised the same amount of money, if you had a house that was valued at $200,000 homesteaded, so you're paying $150,000 taxable value, your bill would go to $2,400. So 10-fold, 11-fold. To those 2,000 people who have homes there, as opposed to the 17,000 lots. For fire, currently residential units $156. Again, same example, same home. That amount would double to 300.
The point of it is ad valorem still doesn't work, but the goal out for those types of services, what we promised at that time when we created the system, I say promised, it was to the Board of County Commissioners in 1981, was that the concept was as development continued, of course we thought development was going to continue to explode in those days, that essentially it would move out from the urban core, and on an annual basis we would review the values per mile and begin effectively annexing in more and more roads into the ad valorem taxing unit. Because, of course, of those types of things that these folks brought up. One of the sidebars of what happened converting when the county decided, I guess in the 90s, I don't know, nobody can really pin down when it occurred, the MSBUs, of course, the assessments to churches and things like that. When we had most of the churches were in the urban taxing units back in 381. We didn't have a problem. So this is one of the casualties of the conversion. Now, to try to give you some idea of where this guy wants to go, is to look at, over time, the conversion of some of these MSBUs to ad valorem MSTUs, with something where between a 2 to 2.5 million millage rate. We are looking at that right now for Lemon Bay, street and drainage unit. Last year at the public hearing, their assessment was going up considerably, their MSBU assessment for paving. There's certain, and it gets very complex, the law, and not the attorney stuff, but the law concerning an MSBU, and you do certain things like a resurfacing program, it has to be accomplished in a certain period of time based on case law. You just can't have a 10-year paving program or 15-year paving program where you do 1/10 or 1/15 a year. You kind of have to get it done in about 6 years, right? 5 or 6, somewhere in that vicinity. If you're a taxing unit, you can actually spread it out over more time. It's just the way the law is. It gives you more flexibility under ad valorem. So we're looking at that right now. I don't know where we'll go. But quite honestly, it works out, Gordon, I think, pretty close to the 2 mills that we had back in 1981. And that area was part of the West Charlotte Urban Street and Drainage MSTU back then. So what we would do is be taking those properties and putting them right back to where they were 30 years ago. And a lot of the churches in that unit and all that stuff would have all those same exemptions that ad valorem taxation provides in the state. So my personal feeling is the original concept of once we have enough value per mile of converting some of these to MSTUs will be the right answer. But I don't know how long it'll take. I mean, we obviously, 35 years ago, thought it was going to happen a lot quicker. But we lost the last 10 years. The last decade was lost with the recession, of course.
Ms. Hess?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Hoyt asked us to submit questions for Mr. Berger so that you could be prepared for it. And the question I asked was about the churches. how many units would be affected if the churches were made non-taxable?
By units?
I mean, areas where you have MSTUs.
Well, it's essentially countywide, Name Blair's and MSBU. I ran a quick, what I did was I did fire and I did the street and drainage. If I look at the street and drainage, if you factored out the churches and spread that cost to everyone else, it ranges, but from a minimum of 10 cents additional per year per home to the highest was $1.80 per home per year. So, you know, it's
About
not
80 cents or
$1.80.
$1.80.
So for instance, if your current payment, that's in, well, just take Greater Port Charlotte, current assessments, $149, it would go up $1.60 if you factored out the churches. And that's certainly the largest area. In the fire MSBU, they're charged at the commercial rate. So if that was spread to everyone, it'd be an increase of 1%. If you spread it just to the rest of the commercial, it'd be an increase of about 5%.